Hey Guild Wars 2 fans, so today what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about roaming in World versus World. This is going to be a beginner slash intermediate guide to roaming in World versus World. What we're going to do is talk about how you can make the biggest impact as a small group of players to affect your server's war score. We're not specifically going to get super in-depth into fighting players in a PvP fashion. We're just specifically going to be talking about moving around the map, specific key bindings that you're going to want to have. I would highly suggest, if you're watching this video and you don't have a full set of Ascended gear, I would suggest before you start roaming that you do have a full set of Ascended gear. I have a guide for that. I'm going to put that in the description below. I will also be talking about the maps for World versus World and understanding the movement as a roamer around those maps, as well as some strategies you can use to flip objectives faster, like camp sacking, and then also be able to decide when you're going to be engaging players in a PvP fashion as you're roaming throughout the map. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, Guild Wars 2 fans, let's go ahead and talk about key bindings. So we are going to talk about how I have my key binding set up. So for the weapon swap, I am using the tilde key as well as 1 through 5 for my weapon. And then I move my strafe keys from default positions there in Q and E. I like to move my heal skill and my high priority slash low cooldown skill to the E, and then I move my strafes down to A and D. That way I'm strafing left and right when I'm moving that direction. And then I primarily control any rotations for my camera with my mouse at that point. I then keep all of my other keys from the tooltip. I move them in closer, that way basically everything is within the reach of the 5 key on my keyboard. So I move to RT and then G. What I do for that is I move my guild to Shift G since I'm not in that as regularly, and then I move the elite skill to just plain G. It's going to be a matter of preference. You can set those keys up a little bit differently on how you want, but that is a quick and dirty way to set your keybinds up. The other thing I'll talk about here real quick are settings that you're going to want to have in your gameplay. So let's go ahead and talk about those real quick. So I will set the double tap to evade off. It's a lot slower than just having a single key bound to do it. I like to use V for mine so that it's really easy to do the jump dodge. I'll show you that here in a minute. The other things that I do are I turn off auto targeting, because if you have a big disengage skill like the Warrior's Greatsword 5, the Ranger's Greatsword 3, and other skills like that, you're not going to want it to target to a specific opponent and then teleport you back towards them if you're trying to disengage. Another setting that I like is setting the ground targeting to max range, so I'll check this. I also like to have skill retargeting, that way if I'm in the middle of a long cast and maybe specifically that target goes down, I can switch it to a different target while I'm even in the middle of the channel. And then for ground targeting, I like to do fast with the ground targeting, that way I can get it at max range and then release the key and make sure that I have it where I want it. You can get it a little bit faster if you just do the instant, but I like to have that a little bit of a check and balance in there personally for my my fast cast and my range AoEs. Alright, next let's go ahead and talk about map movement. So moving around the map as a roamer is one of the most important things. So as you're trying to capture objectives, what you're going to want to do is make sure, as well as, you're realizing that you have 3 separate ways out of spawn. You generally have 3 separate ways out of each objective. You usually have in the case of most camps, you usually have a north-south and or east-west and either north or south way out of the objective. Obviously, the two exceptions to that being the southwest camp on an alpine borderlands, and then the north camp. You really only have two ways out of that and one way out of this camp. Every other camp has three different ways out of it, at least. So let's go ahead and talk about ways to get between camps. So the path between southwest camp and northwest camp is the one that has the least amount of deviation that you can have. You can go up through the ruins to go back over there, but you're generally still going to be cutting in between Garrison and Bay. However, on the east side, you can get through with a little more secrecy. So if you take southeast camp, there are a few different ways that you can go that are going to keep you a little more out of the eyes of your enemy, so to speak. So you can come up past where the harpy is here, and you can actually run underneath the bridge here and go up along the back edge here and cap the objective that way. Likewise, since there's a whole bunch of hills here, you can stay a little more concealed if you take the lower road, as well as cutting up around and then through the ruins. So it gives your enemy a lot less ability to see you there. And then as you're going up to here, then you have a couple different routes you can go. You can take the lower or the higher road up into the north camp, and then likewise leaving north camp, going down into southwest or southeast, southwest camp. You can use the road down through the Scrit if you want to take a little bit longer of a route to kind of throw some timing off, or you could obviously use the north road or this lower south road here. And then you can flip the southwest camp and then head back to spawn is generally what I'll end up doing, and then depending on which camp's off of the closest cooldown is, I'll end up heading back to that camp there. Alright, so here we are at the Desert Borderlands. What we'll do is we'll talk about the elevations and the buffs that are unique to this map. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into the unique buffs that give you more mobility on this map. So if you own each of the keeps, there are shrines around them, and they will give you specific buffs. The air keep gives you a high mobility with the if you have all three shrines, it gives you the eagles on the clouds. So what that'll basically do is allow you to jump from here to here over to here, and that happens within, I would say, between probably about 15 and 20 seconds that you're able to go from the south side of the keep to the north side of the keep. And it's not really easy for any enemies to attack you. I guess they could kind of knock you out of the air if they had a ballista and were waiting for you, but really kind of safe, quick, efficient travel there. The Earth Keep gives you jumping pads if you have all three of them, and it'll activate the sandstorm, so it'll make it a little bit harder for enemies to see down in here. Also, to kind of go back to air here real quick, there is the windfall buff if you have two of these shrines. Then what that'll do is prevent any fall damage that you would have from falling anywhere on the map. If you were to fall and you would actually die normally, you won't actually take any damage. So the other one is Fire Keep. They're a little less interesting. You have the Fire Tornadoes, the Flame Embrace, and the Inferno Hounds. None of them really help with the movement over there. And then let's just kind of quickly talk about the layout of this map. Kind of think of it as a higher profile along the outside, and then there is kind of a lower portion that's going to separate out. So like up on the north side, there is a lower portion here. A lot of this is all on similar terrain around the garrison or the Earthkeep. And then this is back up to a similar elevation the Earthkeep is as to the ground on the northern side. So kind of think of this as like an island with earth around it. And then this is an even lower portion of the map. So you're going to have to climb up at least a little bit to get to any other portion of the map from the central part where the ruins are here. And then as far as getting into and out of this ruins area on the south side, basically there's one road that leads in from each of the more like the spawn type areas here and here. And then as you're going towards the keeps from the west and the east, there are some different options here, 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 and here as far as getting out of there. This is not a spot that you can get out of. You'll have to exit either here or here. And then as far as transversing this area here, you can go up and over, as well as there are some ways that you can skirt down through, more so at the level of the keep itself over here. And then you can also kind of skirt down on the lower portions underneath over here. Alright, so as we're moving across the map here, it's important to remember which team's sentries are there. So right now, since we are on Green's map, I'm going to first take out this Doliac, since this is one of the things that I can do to help my team out the most as a roamer, is I can be disruptive to the supply lines. Now, flipping guards is another thing that is an important role, especially if you have larger groups on the map, because that way you're going to let your larger groups move around with a little more privacy. They have a little more ability to get directly to objectives instead of having to run around the sentries. And it can sometimes be throwing the enemy off when they're not able to figure out where your server's larger forces are at. So flipping sentries is also another good use of the abilities for a roamer. And then we'll talk about stacking camps here as we get down into the camp. This is also really important for being able to keep the supplies of the enemy diminished. That way they're not able to repair or build as much siege. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get these guys in combat, and then we are going to drag them up into a line of sight here. And then once they are all stacked up, we're going to use our damage combo and get these things all down. Alright, so we missed a scout in that, but we were able to get everything down. So all we have to do now is just get this veteran scout down, and then we'll be able to flip this objective. So not a perfect camp stack, but it definitely makes fighting the camps a lot easier. And you can get it down relatively quickly before any enemy forces can respond. Alright. Alright, so here we are at the North Camp. Definitely the most difficult of the camp objectives to flip because it's closest to the enemy spawn. And it has the most guards in it. So the most important thing to do is make sure that we get all of these scouts stacked up. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. One of the easiest is to get them all stacked up over here by the supply depot. And then you can just burst everyone down. And as you can see there, got the camp all stacked up. And we're flipping the North Camp. Alright, so this brings us down to our last point as to actually engaging on enemy players. So as a roamer, especially if you're a new roamer, it's generally safe to go with another person or two. Get used to it. It's really going to depend on your prowess as a PvP player. Definitely look for the situations that you know you're going to be comfortable with. Some of the easier things to do as a roamer is if you see people that are running back to group fights that have already been previously killed, and you can either kill them or slow them down. That's generally good if you can get into, even if it's in a camp, getting into an outnumbered fight as well. There it should be pretty easy as well. So definitely look for those situations that are advantageous for you. Know your abilities, and that'll definitely help you go far as a roamer. So I'm going to roll a little bit of times that I've gone into roaming and ended up fighting with some players, and hopefully you all have a good one, stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.